Good morning, afternoon or evening wherever you are. I'm Paul Clark and welcome to my studio. Now, what have I got for you today? Now, I don't know if you can hear it, but the rain is pelting down on my studio roof and there's definitely a feel of autumn in the air. So I thought we'd have a go at this little autumn scene which includes a lovely little deer. So just before we start, I've got a very quick announcement regarding my YouTube channel. Now this week my local art classes start, which will be running for the next 8 weeks. So it's probably unlikely that I'm going to be able to do a video every week. So it'll probably be every fortnight, every 14 days. But we'll see how we go. You never know, I might be able to do it. But I'm still very much committed to doing this YouTube channel and I've got lots of exciting things happening in the future. I've also had a number of you asking me about setting up a Patreon channel. For those of you who don't know about Patreon, basically you pay a monthly subscription for extra content. And I know a lot of artists do this, and I'm not decrying it in any way. We all have to make a living. But it's not something that I've really thought of doing, and I really love the idea that everyone can watch all my content for free. And that includes the drawing templates as well. However, I have had very generously a few people asking me if they can donate towards the running of this channel. Now what I've done is I've set up a tip jar in the description below, but please do not feel that you're obliged in any way to pay anything towards that. But any donations made will go towards materials, equipment, more beer. Okay, perhaps not the beer.
Get on with it.
Anyway, enough of me rabbiting on. Let's get going, shall we? Okay, so for today's materials, my paper is some Arches cold press, £140. It's in a block, so it won't need stretching. Any decent watercolour paper will do. My paints today is some cadmium yellow, cadmium orange, alizarin crimson, burnt sienna, burnt umber, yellow ochre and some cobalt blue. And 5 brushes today, my large mop, number 12 and number 6 round, my trusty number 3 rigger and my 3/4 inch flat. Now here's a couple of extra colours. Now I'm usually a big fan of mixing my greens, but I've wanted to try these 2 colours for some time. This is the Schminke Super Granulating Tundra Green, which should give us some lovely effects. And this is the Winsor & Newton Olive Green. Gosh, and you can see when it's dry the lovely separation of the colours. So here's the lovely reference photo, which I'm going to change a little bit, give it more of a feel of autumn or fall for our North American friends, and it's courtesy of Pixabay. A simple pencil sketch. The deer is a little tricky, so if you want the drawing template, it's free to download from my website. So painting the background will be much easier if I mask out the deer with some masking fluid. And I'm using a grotty old brush. I've dipped in some liquid soap first just to protect it. Right, off we go with a large mop and soak all the background with clean water. So I'm starting with my flat brush with some yellow ochre and dropping in wet, lots of lovely autumny colours, including some cadmium yellow and orange, burnt sienna and burnt umber, cobalt blue and alizarin crimson. But feel free to use any colours you have. Make sure that you leave that white space there for the sun coming through. And here I'm just using some of the granulation tundra green, so it should be interesting to see here what happens. I'm putting in very rough shapes to suggest some of the fir trees, but I'm hoping they will blend softly into the background. It's good to experiment with your water to paint ratios, putting in more and less pigment into your washes. Here I'm coming in with a very thick and creamy mix of the tundra green, with big broad brushstrokes. Be bold, be brave. I'm also making sure I get good dark values around the shape of the deer, just to make sure I get some strong contrast. Now I've added a little cobalt blue to the tundra green to get this more of a bluish green feel. And of course a little splattering to get some lovely texture, but only here on the near right hand side. Now here I'm splattering in some cadmium yellow, which is semi-opaque, which should add some interesting texture. Now I'm just going to leave the paint alone and let it do its own thing. And here you can see a wonderful happy accident. It's just a back run, but creates a brilliant effect. All unplanned if you let the paint work for you. Next for the grassy foreground, and I'm just randomly splashing in some clean water. And then I'm using some of this olive green in quick broad strokes. Gosh, I'm loving this colour. It's got a real nice warmth to it. Again, experiment with your colours. Here I'm using some of the tundra green again, and washes of burnt sienna and burnt umber, and simply letting them all mix on the paper, including dropping in a few blobs of clean water to force a few of those fabulous spontaneous back runs. And why not? Let's sprinkle in a few granules of table salt just here in the foreground, hopefully for some stony texture. And then flicking in some dark green horizontally across the paper into the damp wash. And you can just begin to see the texture under the deer's legs created by the salt as it begins to dry. Next I'm using my number 12 brush and a very dark mix of green, suggest this tree coming in from the top right. The wooden end of my brush here to scrape in a few details. And of course my trusty rigger for a few little spindly details. It's easy to overdo this bit, so let's keep it nice and simple. But I just can't resist a little touch of random splatter. So now we need to let this totally dry. So it's a perfect time for a short break and a glass of Exmoor Stag.
Oh dear.
So now with my large eraser, cunningly disguised as a piece of toast, and I have to say it works a treat at removing masking fluid. Next I'm very roughly wetting the main areas of the body just to make sure the paint keeps moving. And then dropping in some yellow ochre, leaving a white highlight on the top of the body and head. Here just softening the edge with a damp brush. Now straight in with some burnt sienna, all wet in wet of course. And then some darker shadows with some burnt umber. Now for some of the finer work using my number 6. Now these two legs at the back here are a little tricky because they really just blend into one shape. Now I think the general colour of the deer is a little pale, so I've decided to paint right over the top with a transparent wash of burnt sienna and increasing the value towards the bottom. So we can see that I think he's a she, anyway, is in full cry. So are you ready for my best deer impression? Yeah, quite pleased with that. And of course a little shadow here with some burnt umber. Now for these rocks, and I've mixed a little burnt umber with some cobalt blue for this greyish colour.
It's the same thing in the same way.
And now I'm scoring in with a plastic credit card these rock textures.
Nothing changes. All these
And then dropping in a little shadow.
keeping their mind closed. Hours to say, days to give away, finding things to say.
And of course a little more splattering for some texture.
A space to dream away, just for one day.
Now for this little sapling thingy here, I'm using a very creamy mixture of burnt umber with just a touch of cobalt blue, and then with my number 3 rigger painting in with loose fluid strokes. Now a rigger is perfect for this as it's nice and springy and just seems to do its own thing.
In a different place, in a different way, in a daydream where we all seem to change our minds. Hours to save, days to give away, finding things to say, and go to a place, a space to dream away, just for one day. It's the same thing,
There,
the same
I think we're done.
all the time.
Okay, so looking at it next morning with fresh eyes, I can think of a couple of small tweaks. First of all, this rock could do with just a little shadow. And I also feel that this little tree is just too sharp and crisp and a bit unnatural looking. So I'm going to take a damp tissue and blend and soft just a little. Now we'll call it finished. Well, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did and you'll give it a go. So please don't forget. Oh, what's this? This month's Leisure Painter on the front cover. Tutorial by Paul Clark.
Stop showing off.
Anyway, please don't forget to do all the usuals, like, subscribe if you haven't already, leave a comment. I read them all. I might not get back and be able to reply to every one of them, but I'll look forward to seeing you all again next week, hopefully, for another Watercolour Wednesday. So take care everyone, bye for now.